Hello, welcome to another episode of Red Helix Cyber in Focus. I'm joined today by our technology director, Rob Pocock. Rob, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Brilliant. It's great to have you back on the podcast. I don't think we've had you on for a few episodes. Today, we have got a humongous topic to go through because CrowdStrike has released their global threat report for 2020. This is looking at all of the threat intelligence that they have collated throughout the world from all the endpoints that they're monitoring, all the intelligence they're gathering, and all the analysis they're doing. They've collated it into their yearly report, which has got a humongous amount of statistics, evidence, and theories in it about how cybersecurity has been changing and moving forwards. We are going to attempt in the next 30 to 40 minutes to distill that and tease out some of the more interesting elements and things that caught our eye. It's probably time to jump straight in. There's a landscape overview, which if you read the whole report stands out. There's three main shifts. There's the speed. Things are changing and attacks are being able to happen. There's identity, and then there's this cross-domain approach. There seems to be a theme running through the whole document around those three elements. If we look back at the Red Helix Trends Report for 2020, we've covered those very similar themes that we were seeing amongst the threat. Do you remember those that we talked about, Rob?
Yeah, 100%. Whenever these yearly reports come out, they tend to follow the trends that our customers are seeing. Speed is always getting faster. That's an oxymoron. If we go back 10, 15 years, it was a very slow and low technique hackers and threat actors were using to get under the radar, to get into your network and to then stealthily move across your network and get to the crown jewels. These days, the speed is just phenomenal. We're talking in
it's
some
seconds
cases
now, isn't it?
20 seconds to from getting in to getting out to grabbing some data and leaving. Speed is gone. I'm going to say through the roof, but probably through the floor.
Brings some really significant challenges to defenders. Speed being shift number one that in the overview section is what stood out. They talk about a breakout time, the time it takes from someone to land in your environment for them to then move laterally. CrowdStrike is saying they're averaging around 29 minutes, but they've seen it happen at 27 seconds. This is machine speed lateral movement, which is mad. This creates some significant challenges for the defender because you then suddenly need to be able to respond at machine speed.
When it's happening that quickly, there has to be reasons it's happening that quickly. That's not just AI doing things quicker. It's not just networks being faster. There's a fundamental change which has happened to enable speeds to go down to those tens of seconds kind of answers.
The way actors are able to use AI to modify their payloads, to modify their attack paths, to conduct reconnaissance in people's environments, that's part of what's aiding them in speeding them up, something that previously could have to have taken a significant amount of time with some very stealthy reconnaissance can be done quite quickly now.
AI has given them scale rather than speed. It's allowing them to do multiple things and very, very quickly. When all threat actors were humans, they were thinking of where do I go next? What do I try next? What vulnerabilities out there which I could manipulate, etc. With AI, so it's giving them the scale to do multiple things multiple times, and that's increased the speed.
That's going to cause a real challenge for UK mid-market businesses, especially if they've not got that 24/7 detection and response type security layer, because it's going to take too long for people to get round to triaging the alerts and understand what's actually happened. You're probably going to be figuring that out once the malicious actor's already gotten away with the data or has moved laterally to find the crown jewels or whatever they're trying to do. Shift 2, that was identity. We're not going to cover that right now because I know you've done a lot of research into the identity and how that has changed. But effectively, there is a theme which is talking about identity at the core of your attack surface right now. The new perimeter is what people are saying.
I won't steal my own thunder for later on, but identity, it's a problem of our own creation, which I'll explain why later. But yeah, it is a big problem.
Moving on then to shift number 3, right, is that attacks are now more cross-domain. What does that mean? That means that the actor, who we now know is probably using some stolen credentials, acting as a machine identity or something like that. They're probably trying to mimic the behavior of whoever that user is to stay under the radar. They're then moving laterally super quickly, going back to our first point. Then they're moving to look for whatever it was that they came into the environment for, whether that be in your cloud, data in an application, someone's endpoint, depending on what they're trying to achieve. It's no surprise here. As we've seen cloud usage increase, we're seeing that be a huge domain in itself and create multiple challenges. The SaaS domain is also really important, and even exploding exponentially. Within that, we've got the AI domain, right? People using AI, but also more frequently, we're seeing people deploying AI agents within their and they're highly susceptible to malicious activity. CrowdStrike talk about 37% increase in cloud intrusions. We probably could have put money down on that down the bookies, given that cloud has continued to expand, even though late 2025 there was a bit of a discussion about people saying maybe we should move back on-prem.
We are all going to keep using cloud services for the rest of our lives.
It's only ever going to expand. So we could have seen that. So the greatest shifts we've seen, then speed, identity, which we're going to cover, and then attacks are now cross-domain. And those three elements are significantly changing the attack surface that we're trying to defend. They're changing the TTPs that we're looking at from attackers to understand how we can create those defensive strategies. It's making things even more challenging. If things weren't challenging enough, something which stood out for me in the segment of this podcast that I'm sort of leading on is the evolution of ransomware. There's a lot of discussion in this report of ransomware and how it's changing. It's one of the biggest risks right now to organizations, especially in the UK. And one of the greatest challenges is everyone thinks that ransomware looks like phishing, followed by malware, followed by endpoint encryption. But what's good about the reports and data from CrowdStrike is its real world analysis. This is the telemetry and the analysis of incidents that they are seeing using their Falcon platform that's actually on endpoints, and they're gathering the intelligence from real breaches. The models change with ransomware. You had the old model, phishing, as someone clicks on a link, downloads malicious software, then there's some encryption event which occurs. That's become ever more complicated. The three factors that we spoke about at the beginning are all compounding to that being the case. So you've got modern ransomware, which is now avoiding what you're looking at. We talk about phishing malware. The report is 82% of detections. They're seeing it now malware free. And this links to the identity crisis that we'll talk about later. Social engineering is highly sophisticated. There's then an element of identity compromise, right? There's movement across your different domains. And then without malware, there's elements of data exfiltration, which is taking place. It's not just an encryption problem anymore, because you can stop the encryption, but where has that attacker been in your infrastructure? What do they know? And are they still lurking there? Becomes an increasing challenge. We can't wait for the very noisy action to occur on a machine. Encryption is very noisy. It's quite straightforward for most EDRs or anti-ransomware tooling to pick up the fact that something's been encrypted. It also doesn't happen particularly often. It's relatively straightforward to detect that. We know there's tools on the market that do that, but it's the precursor which has got ever more sophisticated and is happening even quicker. It's more difficult to detect. I pulled out a couple of real world examples. I went away from the report and just looked at, right, what do they actually mean by this? Looking at some of the attack vectors that are being used by actual ransomware gangs. I also used the Halcyon Ransomware Operations Center report. They've rebranded their SOC, calling it the ROC, which is quite cool. There's a nod to them focusing on ransomware. They've got some really cool stats and analysis on what these ransomware gangs are doing. Two that stuck out for me, Zakira and Lockbit. The way that they're gaining access is through VPN, using stolen credentials. Because they've used that VPN, they can then move laterally and exfiltrate data really straightforward. If they feel they need to, they can conduct an encryption event. That's their last hurrah, should I say, if it's required, which is really interesting because previously it was the only thing that they were really trying to achieve. There's living off the land gap as well, where you've got ransomware gangs that are able to get in and get a foothold and even potentially buy a foothold in someone's infrastructure through Access Broker. We've heard about them previously on the ransomware podcast I did with Halcyon, where you can buy access to people's domains. Then they loiter and they try and find out what's going on and where they need to go to be able to meaningfully get exploitable data or actions to then go for a ransom.
That's an important point to break out there as well, Tom, is large organizations we speak to, the massive national, international enterprise companies we speak with, they understand that threat actors to them is a business, and that they have their own support system. When we start talking to the medium-sized companies we also deal with, quite often the first conversation we have with them when we tell them about what we can do, go, who's going to attack me? Who's interested in my business? And it's the initial service brokers who are interested in your business. They will go and scan the world for access to anything, not knowing what it is or who it is or why they've got access to it. But if they can sell that access onto someone else later on, suddenly it becomes important. Everybody is vulnerable to those initial brokers.
Because of some of these tactics, there isn't that requirement to deploy malware with such an impetus there was before, which means that, these ransomware gangs can actually achieve what they want to achieve. They might not have to deploy malware. You might not have known that they've actually been in the environment until it's too late. There's lots of evidence to suggest that one of the first things that they try and do is disable your EDR tools. A common misconception is we've got EDR deployed, we're covered. Actually, if you're not monitoring that endpoint to make sure that it continues to respond, that the EDR has not been tampering with, it's not been bypassed, then you can still have some significant issues. Then the attackers have got the ability to use legitimate tools, mostly remote access tools, to carry out their activities, reconnaissance and moving data around. Halcyon talk about Screen Connect and AnyDesk as being two of the really popular tools that are used in the IT industry on a regular basis. We've probably all got a version of that on our work machines, but because of the identity threat and the challenges that causes, those tools, you can't guarantee that they've not been taken over by malicious actors. That creates even greater problem. The threat from ransomware has got significantly more complex. As a result, CrowdStrike cite that the remediation cost with a similar magnitude increased quite significantly. If a encryption event does occur, the likelihood that you can trace back the attack path through the organization's ecosystem becomes a really complicated process, which takes weeks and days and months. That remediation cost is significant. You've got to try and figure out exactly where the attack path was, where did the attacker go, what did they learn, what data could they have stolen, go through all of the logs to sort of forensically analyze what they did. It's a byproduct that I hadn't quite considered before, because you've got to untangle that sophistication from what happened in your environment. There's a number of ransomware gangs that are using that as well. A couple of examples from Clop, which is a cool name, albeit they're a malicious actor, so they're not one of our friends, but they're not encryption first. They'll go purely on data theft, exploitation, and use that to extort. They're not even deploying ransomware anymore. It's morphed so much. The real challenge here is there's an element of layering which is required to go after these threats. It can't just be your EDR. You've got to make sure you're layering on top of monitoring and other things.
It's one of the things we talk about a lot. Just as your network can become siloed, where you've got people looking after IT, people looking after the network equipment, people looking after the OT equipment. Having siloed tools and monitoring tools is not good. And the same happens in the security space. You got EDRs, you got ransomware, you've got various tools. Unless there's a global overview of all those tools, trying to unstitch the complex links between some of these attacks and what's happening is it can be time consuming and takes a lot of effort.
Yeah, massively. There's a challenge here for the UK mid-market as well. Generally, we're seeing that people are less resilient than the larger organizations that have big internal teams and very significant cyber spends. This response could be slower if you've not got a proactive security program. It comes back to that heavy SaaS reliance, which we know is ingrained into every business.
Yeah, and don't forget as well, Tom, even the larger enterprises outsource a lot of their staff, a lot of their processes. We talk about supply chain. The supply chain can mean different things to different people. Very often, these small to medium-sized companies are the way into the large companies because they're seen as the soft underbelly, where they haven't got a 24/7 20 staff SOC team looking after all of their monitoring and all their security. Those small and medium-sized enterprises are seen as the way in to the large growth companies.
That plays into the hand of the cross-domain shift that we saw and spoke about earlier. If you've got shared systems with supply chains and partners, they may be accessing a certain capability, they're transacting with you, they're moving stock from the warehouse or whatever it is that they're doing, if they're interacting in your SaaS environment, that's effectively a way in. We're talking about ransomware, but in that we've talked about cross-domain attacks and the challenge of identity. We can see everything converging together. It goes back to the adage of looking at the holistic challenge and building a holistic solution rather than focusing on the minutiae of different elements of cybersecurity.
The attack vectors will change. What works for the attackers yesterday or doesn't work today, they'll just move to another attack vector. They're not slow at moving. They've got one aim in mind, which is to get into your network. If the front door's locked, they'll look at the back door. If the back door's locked, they'll look at a window. They will adapt their mechanisms to get into your network.
That brings us on to the next topic, which is identity. We've seen the malware era. These criminal organizations, they now know that that's what we're looking for. And more generally, people have got their antivirus and they've upgraded it to next generation antivirus. People have got EDR and people have got SOC that's monitoring for malicious executables. That malware, 88% of it has gone away, right, from the CrowdStrike report. What's left is identity.
You said it earlier in the preamble. 82% of detections are now malware free. If we look at what cybersecurity was a number of years ago, it was antivirus. It was like, look at files before they come into your network and check they're not malicious. If they're good, fine, let them in. If they're not, stop them. Those days are no longer valid. They're now exploiting something much more valuable than the software or the operating system or the network equipment of it. They're exploiting trust, because that's what identity is. When you give your identity to someone, it's okay, we now know who you are. They're using your valid credentials, legitimate tools, and normal workflows. Just as I would log onto a network and look at financial figures for the company, if someone had my credentials and they did exactly the same as what I do on a daily basis, nothing would flag that up. That's my normal workflow. There is an overused phrase, and I'll use it again to keep the ball rolling, but you know what it's going to be, yeah? Attackers don't break in anymore, they log in. So, and that's where we are today, is attackers are logging in using our credentials, and getting the crown jewels really, really quickly. It's no longer focused on networks, endpoints, applications. It's now cloud platforms, SASE applications, hybrid environments. The attackers will and have adapted to get into that space. Are they even exploiting vulnerabilities? Probably not. They're now just targeting me as an entry point. We saw this in the report. It's gone up 35% of cloud incidents, valid accounts. We've seen these numbers and there's truth behind them. The problem is, once they're in our network using our identity, they really do have free access. If they've got my credentials, they've got the same access I have. They're no longer having to slowly and overtly get through network layers and get through different systems to try and work out other access. They've got my access. If I happen to be technology director, CEO, or head of finance of an organization, we've given them that access and we've given them the path to it. So as human beings, we like things to be simple. Sometimes I amaze myself when I log in the morning, I go to 27 different applications on different parts of the network, cloud services, internal services. I never have to log in again. I log in once in the morning and suddenly I've got access to all these things, because I want to trust our identity a little bit too much. That's a problem we've caused ourselves, because having to put my username and password in and hold 27 different passwords isn't difficult. It's just annoying. We've created systems and processes that allows us to bypass those systems. Oh, you've got single sign-on. You've been authenticated. You can go to this system, and then go to this system, and then go to this system. We've forgotten along the way, if someone steals my identity, we've given them all that access with one easy route. Your identity is the attack surface.
Along the way, you had to configure something or deploy something. So you asked IT, can you give me privileged access? Yeah, okay, go on. Because you keep asking for it, we'll just give it to you and you can have it for the whole time. You've also logged into a slightly untrustworthy ferry booking site from a different part of the world, and your credentials are then stolen and placed on the dark web. And you can see how this becomes the easy way of getting in. There's so many reports online around how these credentials are being stolen. That's before you even get to the point of someone ringing you up and asking for them. Someone might have credentials from the business, maybe less cyber aware than a director or someone like that. But then they are able to send emails on your behalf because, like you said, you've got single sign-on from that, from a device or from a single login. You can then go and request different privileges depending on what you're trying to achieve.
This is also where the speed factors come in. We talked about speed being a major factor these days. If I don't have to install malware, I don't have to try and move laterally because my ID's given me that access to all these systems. All those things which took days or weeks to do undetectable, suddenly you don't need to do any of those. Straight in, you've got access to the crown jewels. All the flows I'm doing, I'm looking into 365, searching documents, moving from one platform to another. That's my day-to-day job. That's my normal network behavior. Therefore, it's very, very difficult to detect if someone's stolen my credentials. Or my identities. That's where the speed comes into it. You mentioned it earlier as well. Is how do we abuse trust? How do the attackers abuse trust? And I won't name the instances, but we've seen it time and time again. They target the help desk. I'm Rob, Red Helix. I forgot my username, I forgot my password, or I've lost my two-factor authentication card. Can you turn it off for 30 seconds so I can log in? It is the most low-tech cybersecurity breach you can have, is someone phone at the help desk and ask them to reset the password. If they've got enough information about you and persistent enough, you will succeed in getting someone's password reset. Then we go on to things like single sign-on and abusing the platforms because those platforms have been designed to be easy to navigate. So once you've done those two things, so you've done some social engineering, you've abused the access that users actually got, and then you look at things like how to make it persistent. So add federated identity providers into an existing system. So suddenly you've got control of the whole identity system. Change your access policies to create those long-term persistent connections. You've got the keys to the kingdom. At that point, you're not bypassing security. You're using the security tools to give you access.
You are running security.
So they don't hack the system, they hijack trust, and there's another well overused phrase. That's what we're up against.
Yeah, that's scary. There's another angle which I don't think we've quite touched on yet. We're talking about the human layer at the moment, human identities using machines, but there's another layer of machine identities, and this is exploding, especially with cloud compute, AI agents, session tokens, hijacking of identity between one thing and another, which we probably don't have sight on in the same way that we do have close management of our Microsoft Online logins and our personas. And that's funny, Rob's logging in from Australia or whatever, but actually you never know because your AI agent that you might be creating will be logging in from the server in Cologne. I think quite a lot of them are. Or that's going to be a real big challenge.
And we're doing so well. We've got half an hour through when you're talking about AI. We're there now. We have to talk about it. If you look at from the identity point of view, convincing the help desk that I am Rob and I've forgotten my password, I can do that faster. I can do it more convincingly. I can get information about me, which the help desk may or may not know. I can produce a video of me, which looks like me asking for a password if they want me to do that. AI is helping the threat actors really be convincing when they're trying to do that social engineering. They're then industrializing what was a pretty well-trodden path already. We can be convincing to people on the end of a help desk call. We can do research about people to find out what golf club they're at, etc., etc. Doing that with AI just makes it so much faster. You gather so much information about people that to do that first reconnaissance, can you reset my password, please, Mr. Help Desk? It makes it so much easier.
The theme of these two areas that we focused on is that's going to continue to be the highlight of what defenders have got at the forefront of their mind when they're planning their security programs in 2026. How these threats are going to materialize, how they're going to change direction of these threat actors, especially when they're powered by AI, are able to adapt very quickly to weaknesses that they're being successful at in people's domains. It's down to us now to provide some key takeaways in terms of practical advice. From my perspective with ransomware, this will bleed across into identity. We've talked a lot about how there's this intersection of everything coming together and how important it is to look at your security stack holistically, not just EDR for a ransomware defense. There's other key elements such as mutable backups being really key as a last resort. There is bespoke anti-ransomware tools. Given that this is such a prominent threat in the UK, they're definitely to be considered. because they have capability that other tools don't necessarily bring to the party. The tool we offer at Red Helix is Halcyon. They have an element of EDR tampering capability. So it will notify the SOC should malicious activity be targeting the back end of the EDR to turn it off, i.e. they're trying to stop themselves from being detected when they want to move laterally and do other things. That's a really key capability based on what attack vectors the ransomware gangs are deploying in people's networks. So really key to think about layering your solution in that way. What stands out for you from an identity perspective in terms of practical takeaways for managing that threat?
After reading the report, I say 3 actions stood out. The first one is identity should be continuously validated. We've got to get away from this fact that you've signed on once in the morning and you are who you say you are, and therefore open the door. That's not difficult to do. It's difficult to convince users that's what they should be doing. We all like simplicity, as I said earlier. But we should be challenged more throughout the day than just the one time we log on in the morning. Okay, we need to focus on behavior, not just access. They are using our legitimate credentials because they've stolen them. So the fact that I've logged in, you should look at what I'm doing on the network and how I'm behaving on the network. Is it different to what I normally do? Thirdly, and you mentioned this already, Tom, is security needs to be unified across domains. You can't look at endpoint, you can't look at cloud, you can't look at identity, you can't look at ransomware, you can't look at all of these things in silos. You've got to have the joined up picture because that's where the threat actors are hiding, in those gaps between those systems. We tend to have sort of very blinkered views on systems. So you've got to have that sort of unified access across all domains in the security realm to actually try and join the dots up.
Yeah, I agree. That all links to that holistic approach. What we're not saying is that gone are the days of EDR. That's absolutely right at the front and center of your defensive strategy. It needs to be monitored 24/7. Layering these capabilities on to enhance what the SOC can see and understand based around identity, ransomware, what are people doing, and how are you detecting and responding to that? By way of some closing comments, what stands out for me from the report, Rob, is speed and sophistication. The way in which the successful attack vectors are being exploited, and we know it's been successful. It was identity and it was ransomware. We've seen that in the statistics from the UK in 2025. But the speed at which these attacks are occurring, the velocity, how many are coming at defenders, and the level of sophistication is what we will see going forward. And my last question to you, Rob, is what was the one statistic that you read and thought, wow, that's either something I wasn't expecting or something that really highlights the point?
Highlights the point is the 82% of detections were malware free. We've all been in the industry for a while, and we've seen these changes happening. When it's written in black and white like that, you realise there has been a seismic shift over the last couple of years of what the threat actors and the threat vectors really are these days.
Mm.
We all like to sit in our little offices saying, it's great, I know, I've patched all my vulnerabilities. Every time Microsoft will release new code, I update all my operating systems, and therefore I'm safe. And people could be walking straight through the front door because they've got your front door key, basically. So we always know, but actually when you see it in black and white, you suddenly realise that cybersecurity is no longer an antivirus problem.
I've had to scan through the list to pick out where my second favorite statistic was, because you've stolen my sandwiches with that one. But there's another one that stuck out to me, which we could have guessed, but if I flip it on its head, maybe that will make us pause for thought, right? CrowdStrike report, it talks about an 89% increase in AI-enabled attacks. Now, I wonder if we flip that on its head and said, are 89% more of defenders leveraging AI in their defense strategy, i.e., are we able to couple the attacker's speed, sophistication, ability to adapt with our defensive speed, ability to adapt to TTPs? Because this is only going to become more of a challenge as this capability proliferates. Now, it'll probably be another discussion, especially given the interesting release from Anthropic about Mythos, their capability that's reporting vulnerabilities within software that's happened in the last week or so. Rob, it's been great to have you on. That was a really fantastic discussion. We've probably bit off more than we can chew, given the richness of the report, but I definitely recommend anyone that's listening to go dig out the CrowdStrike Global Threat Report 2026. If you put that into Google, it will come up straight away. As well, have a look at the Halcyon ROC report. They're releasing them quarterly. Really interesting statistics right from people's endpoints and their management of ransomware incidents, and providing an insight into what is actually happening out there in the market. Rob, thanks for contributing. Thanks for being on the pod. If anything that we've said has sparked any insight or interest, make sure you go to Red Helix website or connect with Rob and I directly on LinkedIn. We'll be happy to discuss further your perspective on what we've been talking about. Thank you very much, Rob.
Cheers, Tom. Speak soon.
Take care. Speak soon.
Cheers. Bye-bye.